Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brain. Something Positive for Positive People is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that serves as the go to hub of sexual health communication resources, specifically for people navigating herpes stigma. In 2017, this organization actually began as a podcast that interviewed people who were more so struggling with suicidation because of their herpes diagnosis, and that evolved into just talking to people about their experience navigating herpes stigma to give people who might be struggling a little bit of a safe roadmap to where they can just tune in, listen to podcast episodes, take what they need, and then be able to go on and apply it in their day-to-day lives. As a nonprofit, one of the things that we do here is advocate for the integration of these lived experiences, which essentially highlight the communication aspects of talking about sexual health and relationship intentions and expectations into sex education resources so that we are able to further minimize the potentiality of new sexually transmitted infections being passed on. Today, I am here with Laura of Zero Proof Nation. And I forget how long ago we met, but I remember that you came to one of I don't know if it was a therapy group, one of the group therapy herpes things, or if it was just a support group in general, or what. Do you remember?
Do you want me to pitch in and chime in?
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Hi, Courtney. I think it was this sort of interactive webinar type thing about being social with other people who had an HSV diagnosis. It was over Zoom. Maybe it was a support type group, but it wasn't therapy. It was definitely a support aspect. And I think that was sometime early last year, maybe. I don't
Oh, it was
know. What's
last year. I feel like it was so much longer ago than that because
Well, this is still pandemic time,
right.
so it's like, what is time? I think it was early last year or maybe late 2021. I don't remember,
I could see
honestly.
that. I think it might have been 2021.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, I recall early on seeing you talk a lot about like sobriety and not drinking, and
Hmm.
that was something that I think that you kind of plant seeds in people's heads when
Okay.
you just kind of live in your own way and you're expressive and you put that out there. But one of the things I wanted to tell you was in July, I decided to take a month off from drinking. And during that
Okay.
month of not drinking, I also didn't masturbate. This was interesting. So I don't know which one of these had like more of an influence, but I was able to write the first draft of a book for something
No.
positive for positive people. I was also able to, what else did I do during that month? I got done and I was like, oh, this is what I can do. Not that I drank a lot, but
Yeah.
it was something that I had more energy for, not being hungover, and also the discipline that came with saying no to wanting
Hmm.
to go out and just drink or go to a friend's house and just drink and talk. Because one of the things that, in my experience, I've learned about alcohol is that I have historically used alcohol to make myself more present, but the reality is that's made me less present. And after having some
Yeah.
experiences with not drinking alcohol and being in an environment where maybe other people are drinking, I recognize just how present I am and how uncomfortable it can be to be around all of these people making an attempt to be present through alcohol, which offers sort of this illusion of, I guess, connectedness,
Yeah.
and everyone's like, oh, hey, if we're all drinking, we're more connected. Whereas it's kind of like a disconnection from being present because when you are present and you kind of feel everything happening around you, it can be a
Hmm.
little bit intense. So,
For
uh,
sure.
the thing that I wanted to say was, all right, July, I decided not to drink, and then I think I went to karaoke and they had these little juices things there, and I was like, ooh, that looks good, I want that. And then I learned that there was alcohol in it, and I was like, oh dang, that messed up my sobriety, but oh well, we here now. And like I didn't
Yeah.
get drunk. I don't even think I got tipsy to be honest. But there was that time
Hmm.
and then another time where I had a margarita, and I was like, yeah, this don't do it for me anymore because I don't see the alcohol. I see the dollar amount that's being spent now, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, you know what? $10 to try and be present when I know that like me just not drinking makes me more present. I don't think it's worth it anymore.
Well,
So I want to say that seeing you live out loud in that way, even if I just see a post every now and then or something like that,
Yeah.
was something that I think contributed to my decision to explore that. And I mean, to this day, I don't have a desire to drink. I'll go out places and I'll just, not drink. And it's as simple as that. The most uncomfortable part of it is when I want to go to a bar and it's like, this bartender's asking me what I want and I'm about to order something that's non-alcoholic. How are they going to view me? Are they going to think I'm cheap and that I'm not going to tip? And can I stay up here at the bar and hang out like I would if I were drinking, right?
It's another layer of stigma.
Yeah.
We've gone through enough, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's another layer. And also another sort of side point is that you mentioned that the cost of alcoholic beverages, well, non-alc costs a lot too these days, and that's another story for another time. But wow, like you wrote the first draft of a book just by not drinking for a month. I'm so impressed. Congratulations, that is insane.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's for something positive for positive people. Essentially condensing the podcast itself from 300 whatever episodes at the time of its release down into a book, just kind of sharing my experience. Because people ask me all the time, well, how did you deal with it? What happened to you? And I'm like, it's not fair for me to ask you to go and listen to the podcast because that story's like sprinkled in there in bits and pieces. So instead, I'll be able to ask, oh, did you purchase the book? Or something like that. So, it's nice. And I had a lot of contributions from some of my board members about different parts of it. And I've had a lot more clarity, of course, but general creativity overall and being able to more clearly see further out. Like I've always been the kind of person who I look right down, take one step in front of me, but I'm able to see like a few more steps out in front of me, just from this clarity, I would say. And in addition to that, I do know how much alcohol had to do with this. So I've been very mindful of like my health lately. And in attempting to, I have had high blood pressure for like 12 years, probably since I was born, to be completely honest. But I received a warning of, hey, we're going to have to get you on medication for like the last 10 years. And I've just been blowing it off. And I've just not like added salt to my food. But instead of, like, what I've learned is that it's not just adding salt to your food. It's like the sodium that's in a lot of the foods that I've eaten. And so when I would drink, I would lose any and all sense of control. I could eat a whole pizza, 12 chicken wings, drench it in ranch, and eat toasted ravioli. I remember, these things. I can eat a lot, but it doesn't mean I have to eat a lot. So I've been able to incorporate some of that presence and mindfulness into my eating habits. And like in that process, while my goal wasn't necessarily to lose weight, it's just been to lower my blood pressure. I have lost a significant amount of weight, and I credit that to not drinking.
You were crushing it.
This was what I wanted to talk to you about. Like, I wanted to just save it for the podcast and get that real response from you. But no, I want to thank you. Between you, and there's someone I follow on Instagram in Australia. She recently started posting about her own journey with sobriety, and I'm just seeing it a few different places. There's also the sober sexpert, I want to say.
Yeah, Tawny.
Yeah, that's her name.
She's a good friend of mine. She just wrote a book called Dry Humping.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
But
it's great.
Yeah, like seeing these influences has really been something that's helped me in my personal life. So I wanted to bring you on here and say thank you for that.
Oh,
and
thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting yourself out there.
That means so much to me, and you caught me on a day where I was kind of just feeling major like imposter syndrome and just kind of general being down about a lot, so that means a lot to me. Don't take away all of your credit though. Like, you did the work, and I can't believe you've written the first draft of a book. I'm just like, wow, that inspires me, because I don't know if anyone out there listening is even familiar with me, and if not, that's totally cool. So it gives you an intro to who I am. But I've been alcohol free, sober, booze free for 16 years. And so that's the better part of my adult life. I got sober when I was 24, and so I've spent most of my 20s, all of my 30s, and now into my first year of my 40s, without drinking alcohol. And so, maybe in the beginning I had some like spurts of clarity where I was like, wow, it's nice to not have a hangover. I still love not having hangovers, by the way. It's one of the best perks of not drinking alcohol to this day. It's still one of my favorite things, but now I'm just, living life. So I've got to find that discipline again to start writing, the first draft of my book. Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing.
24 seems like a pretty young age to decide to just stop drinking, especially, most people are starting to make money and being able to go out and socialize with friends, going to the bars, clubs, etc. What made you decide to give up drinking at age 24?
Well, it wasn't one of these like, I'm sober curious, I want to be mindful with my consumption. There wasn't any kind of language then about sober curiosity and about trying out a month without drinking, like a dry January or a sober October or a dry July. It was, you're either an alcoholic or you're normal. And that was the language that I was coming into. That was the discourse, and that was the stigma against people who didn't drink alcohol. I didn't have a sort of a choice in the way, like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to quit drinking. I put myself, frankly, in a lot of really dangerous situations and had a lot of negative consequences. I only drank for 6 years, starting from age 18 until 24. And there's a saying that a lot of people who sort of have this history with drinking alcohol and substance use disorder, they say, first it was fun, then it was fun with problems, and then it was just problems. And so that was my trajectory in the course of 6 years. By the last year and a half, I was hospitalized for alcohol poisoning twice. And then on top of countless negative sexual situations, dangerous, just putting myself in vehicles with people who were drinking, so many things that I vaguely remember. And then, of course, there's a lot of stuff that I don't remember. And so after my second hospitalization for alcohol poisoning, I really felt scared. Something was different. Like I said, I'd been, rushed in an ambulance to the ER once before for alcohol, and it scared me, but something inside internally, it just hadn't clicked yet. And so I kept drinking after that, not the day after, maybe not even the month after, but I didn't have a plan. I didn't have any tools in my tool belt, and I was too young. I was 22 at that time. So the second time, like I said, something internally clicked. I don't know what it was. I didn't think in terms of forever, because that sounded way too scary. And all I knew was that I needed professional help. And I didn't know what that was going to look like or what my life would end up looking like. But I know that once I started this intensive outpatient program, I just really liked not having hangovers. And that was the biggest thing that just kept me going. And of course, over time, my relationships with family and friends, and some friends I had to cut out because they were toxic, but maybe they would think of me as toxic. If the shoe fits, it depends. But all throughout, I never thought in terms of forever. I just knew that I was starting to feel better. And again, there weren't any non-alcoholic options back then other than soda, or milk. I was like, I'm not in an episode of the Brady Bunch. Like, I want something else. But, in the first year, I wasn't looking for non-alcoholic options. I just needed to stay sober. For me, that was what it was. And as I got more comfortable, not drinking, I was navigating being a mid-20 something without alcohol in sort of the quote unquote prime of my young adult life. It was prime yuppie territory, going out to happy hour, going to weddings, being in weddings, like all of the things. And, I felt so excluded because I wasn't the one drinking alcohol. So it was more of a thing that I needed to do to save my life, frankly, to get sober. And now it's turned into like my life. Of course, there's a reason I'm on this podcast, so who's gonna address the elephant in the room, right?
Well, before we transition to that, something that came to mind as you talked about, being hospitalized twice for alcohol poisoning. I remember the last time I prayed, I was about between 24 and 25 years old, and I said, God, listen, if you got a lesson to show me, I need you to just don't take off a limb, don't put me in a car accident, just like show me I'm doing the right thing, and I'll just keep doing that. Don't like blow my life up with a terrible thing happening to teach me a lesson. Like I'm good at learning lessons by positive reinforcement, right? And so my question for you is, how can someone kind of see the signs before it hits or it starts to get to a point where they put themselves in dangerous situations, or before they end up hospitalized for alcohol poisoning, where they may think that they may want to assess their relationship to alcohol?
Yeah. Well, I would, first of all, it is purely individual to every single person, and drinking 2 glasses of wine and feeling a little headachy and dizzy might be someone's like, this is my sign that I can't feel like this anymore. And for someone else, it might take them a hospitalization to realize that they can't keep putting themselves and others in danger. So everyone has a personal sort of like set point, or a point of no return. And I would certainly hope that people don't reach the point where they are getting hospitalized for alcohol poisoning. I didn't get my stomach pumped, but I was heavily monitored throughout the night for both of my stays in ERs. And it's difficult because like when you're in it, you're not thinking rationally. Like when you're intoxicated from alcohol, we know that it's called intoxicated for a reason. It's a toxin, it's a poison, and when it's in your system, it affects so many different things, not just physiologically, but neurologically, emotionally, all of the things. And so your brain is just not thinking rationally, and it can be very difficult to access any kind of not will, but just like self-control, impulse control, like stopping yourself before it gets worse. So, and I'm telling you, like I thought of myself as quite responsible beforehand, and still do, but I would always impose limits on myself. Tonight is a 2-drink night for me. I'm going to space it out with water. And I did, and then something would change, and I would drink another drink or drink. There were plenty of nights where I had a quote unquote normal night where I ended up back home. There wasn't Uber back then, but I would either like Metro home, take a cab home, whatever the case may be, get home safely, be in bed. Nothing went wrong. But just as many nights, something would go wrong, and of course then there were those handful of nights that were really traumatic. So it's really difficult to say, like, how can you stop yourself from getting to that point? I think now there are so many more beverage options that provide social elixirs and social gelling, whether they're functional beverages, whether they're light cannabis beverages. If people want sort of some sort of different mood or mood enhancing, I'm not here to judge what someone does, but it's ultimately going to still be healthier than drinking alcohol. But there are other options that they can have so that they don't feel like they have to have alcohol to get to a different place. But it's really hard once you already have alcohol in your system to make those self-controlling decisions. So I would just encourage people to be sober curious, to be more mindful of their consumption. There are so many great books and podcasts out there. One of the like sort of Bibles of sober curiosity is called Sober Curious. I mean, it doesn't have to be any more obvious than that. And it's a really great book on just getting curious about your consumption, treating it like a scientific experiment, trying 1 month of not drinking alcohol. It's a lot more difficult if it's like a food issue someone has. You can't stop eating, but you can stop drinking. Uh-huh. You can't stop drinking. It's hard. It's not easy. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If that's something that's part of your, like, life, it's going to be difficult, but like it's so worth it. It's just so worth it. And even if you drink less, like there are a lot of people who can moderate or can just drink less alcohol, and that is ultimately that's harm reduction. So it's much better than getting drunk if you're drinking like a glass or two of wine or a few beers, spread out throughout the night, as opposed to like a 6-pack of beer or a whole bottle of wine. Like, again, reduction is key. So it doesn't have to be a total, abstinence. But yeah, I would just, invite people, rather than caution people, invite people to be a little more curious about what they put in their systems.
As you were talking, a story came to mind, and I had a little bit of an aha moment because personal story time, yay. So
Yay.
I remember I met someone and we had sex while we were both drinking, and then we had sex when neither of us were drinking. So we met for the first time, we connected, things were going well, we negotiated things, I disclosed, I have herpes, she doesn't. First night time, whatever we want to call it, that we hooked up, phenomenal, memorable, mind-blowing, couldn't wait to do it again. A little bit of time passed, thought I'd never see her again, and she reached out and was going to be in the same place as me for another event that I was taking part of. And we met up this time, and at this time, I wasn't drinking. And I let her know, I was like, hey, I'm playing with this not drinking thing. And she was like, oh, okay, well, I've been wondering about that myself, so I want to drink. So cool. We get together and we're not drinking, and in hindsight now, I recognize that she seemed to have needed that alcohol to perform in the way that she was performing. And for me, it felt as if I recognized that like I was just more present and in tune with what was happening around me, not drinking. So I was able to pick up on things that may have been present before that weren't now. Like I now, from having this conversation with you, wonder if the second time it was like more of her thinking in her head, because I pointed this out to her. I was like, hey, it seems like you're making an attempt to end these sex sessions a lot faster. And I didn't register that until after we had like a check-in, after we had parted ways for the weekend. And she started crying like when I pointed that out to her. I was like, it seemed like that's what was happening. And I know we had a lot of conversations about like her past trauma, so I kind of knew what not to do, what to do. And so in communicating with her, afterwards, she just was like bawling. She was like, I don't, no one's ever noticed her ass. And she just felt like so seen from that experience. And, here I am kind of like feeling a little bit bad because, I mean, not because I made her cry, but because it's like, I wish that I would have had words and language to mention that in the moment, but it was just like an avoidance of presence for her with alcohol, because for her, using alcohol meant that she was able to be more present and avoid whatever the real presence would bring up for her. And this time that wasn't the case. But the thought that I had was maybe she actually wasn't okay with me having herpes because she didn't have herpes, and that's why it was like sped up, and she didn't want to like hurt my feelings. This is just a thought, not to say that this is the thought.
Yeah,
because this
well,
is
it's an interesting thought. I mean, I don't know. I'm not her, but I don't think that was it was just probably the fact that as a woman who's had sex with and without alcohol, all of the emotions are much more front of mind, and I have felt emotionally raw after intercourse before in different points in my life. So it's just possible that something about the conversation sparked that in her, or who knows? You said that you had a conversation with her to begin with, and she heard you and registered, I hope. Who knows? But I mean, I don't know if she was aware of the fact that you had HSV the second time.
Yeah, we talked about all of that.
Then,
yeah.
Right, but I'm just like, then why would she rush through it if if it bothered her, like, don't do it in the first place. Like, I don't think that's what was going on. There's probably something else there, but it's so interesting how when you take away the alcohol, a lot of, it's usually alcohol is it's a symptom. It's not what's really going on. It can mask things. It can help. It's a coping tool. It's a negative coping strategy, but it's a coping strategy to quote unquote feel more confident, feel more comfortable, feel more at ease in the moment, so to speak. But it ultimately and usually ends up in worse anxiety the next day. And I used to drink because for a variety of reasons, but only until I got sober did I realize that I was self-medicating over a lot of undiagnosed mental health stuff. I have OCD. It's very debilitating, actually. The fact that I'm able to maintain different contracts and work and be, a figure in my industry while still battling a lot of mental demons and not drinking is a huge feat for me. But it's something that drinking alcohol just made it it muted it a little bit. It just made it fuzzier. It wasn't as sharp in my head. I have a history with panic disorder, generalized anxiety, and of course a lot of trauma, big T and little t. One of my big T's is obviously what landed me on this podcast. And it's not the diagnosis per se, but it certainly is the diagnosis at the same time. It was a result of date rape, and it was the night I lost my virginity. So it was the trifecta: losing my virginity via date rape and getting herpes, right away. And so for my whole adult sex life, I have had to navigate having HSV-2. I have not had a breakout since my initial diagnosis, maybe once a few years into it. But that's, what is time? Let's see. That's 18 years. I was 22 when I lost my virginity, which is old for some people, but I was 22. It was the night before college graduation, and it was with a boy that I had a huge crush on all my whole 4 years, and I went into the situation very consensually. And then the way it happened was not consensual, and it was not with protection, and that's not something that I consented to. I was in health class. I remember all of the stories, and I was like, you are not coming near me without a condom. Like, let's go have some late night food. And anyway, suffice it to say is that before I knew it, how graphic can I get, or how should I,
I'll put it in the show notes,
okay,
heads up.
Okay. Well, I don't want to.
As comfortable as you are sharing, because I want this to just be you sharing your experience.
Right. So, I went in very consensually. I wanted to have sex with him. I had a huge crush on him. It wasn't ever love. It wasn't love, but it was like I held a torch for this guy, and I wanted to have sex with him. I wanted to lose my virginity to him. I thought, anyway. Trouble with the condom, and I was like, well, why don't we go, because I didn't know how to put one on. We glossed over that in health class. Like, I'd never seen one in real life, really. It's just like, and so we went to this late night food place and came back and, watched TV and had our food. And then I kind of fell asleep. We were sober, by the way.
Okay.
We were not drinking alcohol. So I was sober. I was still in my drinking days, but I was not drinking that night because I wanted to be present for this. And then the next thing I knew, he was inside me without a condom, and I didn't really realize.
And you cut out a little bit earlier. You said you fell asleep.
I was kind of food coma-y on the bed, awake but not totally awake, sort of in that liminal state where you're kind of falling asleep, but I was not passed out. I was kind of sleepy, and we were not drinking alcohol, and the next thing I know, he's inside of me without a condom, and I was really kind of paralyzed because I didn't know what to do. I was like, I'm having sex, right? Like, I think I'm having sex. But I was like, but this is not the way that I wanted it to be. But like, what am I supposed to say? What can I say? Like, should I, get him to get off of me? Like, is he wearing, there were so many things that were going through my head at the same time. And, like, I do realize that there are some people that just don't know that they have HSV, because so many people just like, I think COVID taught us a lot of things about being asymptomatic, right? You can be asymptomatic but still carry and pass it along. And I thought we had a safe sex discussion, but like, I had never had a partner, so I knew that I was coming to the table with a clean slate. But we didn't really talk about a lot of those things. We were still kids. Like, we were kids. And the thing that I'm even more sort of like embarrassed or ashamed about is that I went back the next night and willingly engaged in unprotected sex, because I thought that was the only way that he was going to have sex with me. And so a week later, I started getting like the worst pain in my life in my genitals, and I didn't know what to do. I was with my parents. I didn't know how to drive, so I couldn't drive myself anywhere, because my dad's a retired U.S. diplomat, so we were overseas. I was working at the embassy as my part-time job, as my summer internship. And so I had to tell my mom, I was like, I think I either have a yeast infection or an STD, and I need your help. Like, I need to go to the health unit at the embassy. And that's when they told me. They did not really have a good bedside manner there. They weren't like, oh gosh, we're so sorry about this. Like, they were just like, you're not going to be able to have a child if you have an outbreak. Like, you're going to, all of these, it was just traumatizing. And of course, then I had to get like HIV tests and chlamydia tests and gonorrhea, and I was not prepared for, and pregnancy tests, like all of the things. I was a child. 22 feels so old when you're 22, but you're a baby at 22. And it was just a lot to have to digest. And all of it was because something was done in a way that I didn't agree to. I didn't sign off on that. And it left me with having to navigate my whole life with needing to disclose to people, because I was never going to willingly put someone in the same position that I was put in. And I've gotten rejected so many times over the years, because there's, as you are well aware, Courtney, there's a humongous stigma still around herpes. And people are like, oh, I don't want to get the herp. And like, when I hear stuff like that, it just digs right into me. It hurts. It just, because people just don't have the education. They're starting to get more with resources that are out there, like yours, but there's just so much of it that perpetuates, because there's this asymptomatic shedding for a lot of people, and they don't realize that they have it. And I did, by the way, confront this guy on a phone call shortly after I got diagnosed, and I said, you gave me herpes, like, how could you do that? I didn't have the right language to really address him either, and he was like, I didn't know, I'm so sorry, what are you talking about, like, a lot of denial there, but he probably didn't know that he had it either. Of course, over time, I've just had to forgive him, because that lets me off the hook. I was living with a lot of resentment, and it was just hurting me. But it has been difficult over the years to find partners who either have had their own experience with it, have had partners with it, or are just like well-read and understand. By the way, like, having herpes and in the age of COVID, that's a whole other thing. That was not fun to navigate, because you're dealing with two different things that can be spread. But we all know that herpes isn't deadly. It's not. It's not, and it's manageable. And I've been taking medication for years and years and years, but gosh, it was a doozy the way that it happened. So, sometimes things are really ironic. I had never had sex before, and then all of a sudden I had herpes.
Thank you for going there and sharing that story with me. Are you okay? Need a breath or break or anything?
Yeah. Well, I just took a breath.
Okay.
I knew we were going to go to some places. I'm divorced enough from the situation.
I thought you was about to say divorce from him. I was about to ask you how that
no.
relationship.
I mean, like, I mean that I've had a lot of time and therapy, and I've worked through a lot of that, and but gosh, I still had a lot of self-flagellation, and only recently, in the past few years, when I think I found you, and I found a couple of other blogs out there that were really doing some powerful things around talking about herpes, is when I put my diagnosis on my dating site. And I'm not on a dating site anymore. I've been seeing someone for a year now, and it's just a really wonderful relationship. But yeah, I mean, I was just like, I'm tired of getting rejected, and even though I'd had practice with disclosure, in the early days, I would have a lot of emotions around disclosure, like unload some of my trauma dumping to people, and over time, and as I did age, like, I got more comfortable with just sharing the facts, like, hey, I have a skin disorder, and or whatever you want to, however I ended up saying it, but I was just like, I was tired of having that conversation, and instead I just wanted to put it on my dating profile, and then we could have conversations around that, but at least the cat was out of the bag that way. But man, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like, it's been one of the most, like, difficult things to navigate through, and then having herpes and being a sober person throughout the better part of my adult life, it was a lot to wade through. And so anyone who's going through either of those things, like, gets a vote from me. But if you have both, it's very difficult. And I'm here as a resource, trust me, but it's hard. It's really hard. I'm not going to take that away from anyone. It's very difficult, but there is definitely hope.
Oftentimes when people receive a herpes diagnosis, they have experience to draw from that life beforehand, and they can say, oh my God, my sex life is now over because before I had herpes, this is what my sex life looked like. You didn't have that. So
no.
Can you talk me through what some of your thoughts were when you got your diagnosis, aside from being told you can't have kids if you have an outbreak?
Yeah, I mean, well, gosh, it's hard to go back 18 years, but I just thought, like, I just felt like I was never going to have sex again. And
the way that you had sex, though, had sex ever become enjoyable for you up to that point?
Well, I'd never had sex before.
No, I mean, like, so the first time you had sex, you were raped.
Right.
And then you said you went back, and over the next week you got a diagnosis. So
Correct.
Did sex ever become something meaningful to you at all? Like, you said that you wanted to have sex, you wanted to have a sexual experience with this person, and then you went forward to have sex afterwards. Mm-hmm. What was it to you? Did it ever become the kind of sex you wanted to have, is my question.
No, because I mean, it was just like, it was 2 nights, like,
okay, it was just twice. I thought it was over the week. Like, okay, all right.
No, it was 2 nights. But even over the week, like I don't think I would have. I mean, it's not like years had passed or months had passed where it definitely did not. I always thought I was going to lose my virginity to someone that I cared about, like every girl in every movie, right? I just thought it was going to be a little more special, but I thought at the same time that this was going to be a special experience because I had known him for 4 years. Whether or not we were even good friends, like, I don't know, but it wasn't a stranger. So I had a lot of my own reservations about calling it date rape for years because I was like, well, I knew him. Well, probably just calling it rape. I was like, I knew this person, and it wasn't a violent situation at all. But over time, as I've become more educated about consent and about the language around all of this, I realized it was not consensual the way that it happened. I didn't get a say in how it happened, and even if he wouldn't have known that he was a carrier, I would have, and I would have liked the option of knowing that, hey, at least like use protection with me. So it took a long time for sex to become meaningful in any way. And also, I mean, navigating all of that at the same time as navigating sort of coming to terms with being bisexual my whole life.
Plot twist. I feel like that just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, plot twist. Yeah, I mean, I was dealing with a lot of internalized biphobia, internalized, like, I wouldn't say self-hatred, but certainly
maybe like apathy, like self-apathy, or self.
I don't know, but like the having this mental health stuff, having the drinking stuff, and then getting sober, dealing with having herpes, and then dealing with, like, these feelings that I had.
An identity crisis.
Yeah. God, my whole, like, 20s had been essentially a big, fat identity crisis, because I wasn't comfortable sharing that I was bi. I didn't do a lot of experimenting, so I figured it probably didn't, I mean, like, I've learned a lot, ironically, or not ironically, from the sober sexpert, from Tani. She's in what's considered, I guess, like a heteronormative relationship, but she talks a lot about, that doesn't take away the fact that she's bisexual. And that gave me a lot of courage to share out loud with me. Like, I've been in only, like, quote unquote heteronormative relationships, but I've always been bisexual, and I've had a few experiments over the years, and I haven't done a whole lot, but it doesn't take away my sexuality. But I was dealing with all of that at the same time, and it was a lot. And so therapy works. It's amazing. I love therapy. But yeah, there was just a lot that I was going through, a lot that I was dealing with, and we all know that life, just like recovery, just like anything, I mean, it's not linear. There are a lot of ups and downs, and my recovery is not about drinking anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. It's about my mental health. It's about the journey that I'm on with my mental health disorders, and okay, vulnerability hangover. This whole podcast is a vulnerability hangover.
I know. I a lot of people go here with me, and then I don't hear from them ever again. So I hope that we can at least still follow each other on social media. There's two questions that are lingering right now for me. One of which is typically people's first sexual experience kind of shapes their, like, turn on. So sometimes, like, our traumas can become linked to our turn ons in a way. You're shaking your head. Is that something true for you? Even something that your first sexual experience happened in your 20s, do you find that there are any components of that still play a role in your sexual arousal now?
Yes. But it wasn't so much about, like, it's not like I'm looking for power plays or, being I'm still kind of working my way around language, around, like, sex positive language. So it's not about, like, rape fantasies or power moves or BDSM, because it was not like that. It was, again, not consensual, but it wasn't like that. I think how it's sort of affected me up until, today is that this kid was a redhead, and I've still had kind of, I love gingers. As a result, I don't know, like, it's just what it is. I know you're hiding right now, I'm sorry, but it's just like that. I mean,
I'm trying to keep my laughing off the mic.
No, it's fine. Please laugh, because that's kind of how it sort of played a role for me. That I was just constantly drawn to redheaded guys and gals, but mostly redheaded guys. And yeah, it's a direct result of me having a huge crush on this guy who ended up, like, not knowing it, honestly, but, like, effectively, quote unquote, ruining my life. But as I've realized that it's not, like, yeah, I'd love for there to be a cure. I know you would too, probably, maybe. But at this point, it's just like, it's a dormant thing inside of me, and the medication that I take is more for someone else's protection rather than my own, because I don't get outbreaks. And if I didn't know that I had it, it wouldn't affect my life in the least. So it only came up, or only comes up, when I have to have disclosure conversations, which have always been like the biggest source of anxiety for me. Like, it just, up until my current relationship, the last guy that I dated, God, I was like very drawn to him, and I disclosed to him when I wasn't, like I didn't, there was no waterworks. It was just like a very factual conversation. And it was around the time, I think, that I went to your support session that had some, like, ways to disclose in sort of a sex positive way. I think that was the conversation. It was like disclosure, sex positive disclosure. And he seemed to take it really well. But just a few days later, he was like, I can't do this. I can't, I can't put myself in a situation with someone who has, an STD. And meanwhile, he'd been telling me all these things about how he's so progressive and how he's so, like, he's been with so many different types of people and had a very, like, wild sexual appetite, or a very varied, I don't know what, but to be rejected over that, it's like literally one of the most common things ever. But it really affected me because, again, I was like, I don't know about you, Courtney, but every time I had to put myself out there, it's just emotionally draining, emotionally exhausting to have to do this disclosure conversation. When for some people it's not a big deal. I had gotten really, really good at starting to, like, just take out any of the emotional junk around it. But I was still getting rejected, and that's what led me to just, put the herpes on my Hinge profile. I got a lot fewer matches, but it was on my terms, and I felt much more empowered about it. I didn't meet my current partner through Hinge, but I felt so empowered by putting it forward, saying, like, this is me. I am, I'm medicated. I am well-read, educated. I can help you. You can do your own research, but this is the deal. And, if you still want to talk, here, hit me up or whatever. Yeah. I don't know what it was. And I had it, I had it, like, in the pinned, in my pinned posts on Instagram for a long, long time, because I wanted people to know that it's okay. Like, it's totally okay. And it needs to be more normalized. But I'll be honest, like, it's been one of the most challenging things to have to navigate in my adult life, more so than sobriety, like, actually by a lot.
Okay. The second question that I have for you was, you mentioned alcohol sort of being like a coping thing for all of these other things that you had going on that were undiagnosed. My curiosity is, what's replaced alcohol, if anything? So, like, if alcohol was your crutch for avoiding dealing with said OCD and whatever else, like, where,
all my other stuff,
where are you able to put that? I don't want to call it addiction, but there's like an energy of compulsion that I think we tend to invest a lot of ourselves into. Alcohol can be one, but when you remove alcohol, what's there next? Is there sex? Is it sex that's there? Is it vaping that's there? Is it reading? Is it obsessively cooking, going to the gym, right? So that's my question, if that's clear enough for you.
Yeah, it's totally clear. And by the way, if that's not enough, like, add actually having obsessive compulsive disorder to that mix, because it's a lot of fun when you do that. So it's not so cut and dry for me. I didn't have another, addiction that I replaced it with. I do have definitely an addictive personality, but in hindsight, I can see that, and I'm still in a lot of trouble as a result. I am not responsible with money, or was not responsible with money. So it's not that I had a shopping addiction. It's not that I had a spending problem, a gambling problem, but I never really knew how to manage my money. And so that was going on when I was drinking and when I got sober, and continuing into my 20s and to my 30s. And now here we are. I'm in a lot of debt, and I don't have any savings really to my name. And it's all stuff that I've had to just, like, work my way through. And some of it I feel like was a direct result of, like, after I quit drinking, I didn't address my money issues. So it's not like I was replacing any kind of addictive behavior or compulsions, but I was not addressing all of the underlying things that were going on. And seeing a therapist, seeing a psychiatrist, dealing with my drinking stuff and with my mental health was one thing, but I left this other thing completely unchecked. And I've just racked up a lot of credit card debt and consumer debt and all sorts of things over the years. And it was a little more like insidious and slow, as opposed to, like, going out and blowing thousands of dollars, which I didn't have in the first place. So yes and no. Not any sort of immediate thing. Like, I don't smoke. I'm really grateful that I don't, because I know that's even more addictive and harder to quit. But I don't smoke. I don't do any other drugs other than caffeine, and I keep it to like 2 cups a day. And but yeah, I mean, I had and still have some money issues that have continued to haunt me, because I didn't look at everything and get help for everything when I probably should have.
Do you find that in dating that these other things have an influence on our disclosures? When we look at disclosure, right, we think about herpes disclosure. But
Yeah.
if I think finances and things like that might
Yeah.
even play more of a role with someone that you're wanting to get into a relationship with. And a lot of times people don't even make it that far into the conversation, but that's like something that should come up a
Yeah.
lot sooner, because that
Yeah.
could be a deal breaker for someone. If you're someone who is equally irresponsible with money, that ain't gonna work out. Or if you're with someone who is very good with money, being able to come in and say, all right, well, here's how I do things. Like, if we get together, like, we'll have a budget. I'm going to help you get on track. Those kinds of conversations, are those difficult for you to have, or do you have them at all?
Not anymore, because I've been in a committed relationship for a year. But one of the things that I liked about OkCupid, before it got just crazy, is all of the questions that it had. Like, is dating someone who's in debt a deal breaker? Is dating someone who's messy a deal breaker, or overly clean? Because I'm messy, not dirty, not in that way anyway, and not in any way, but like, but poor joke aside, like,
I chuckled.
someone being super, super uptight about being like so clean that you can't put anything astray, that would be a deal breaker for me more than dating someone who's messy. So it's like, but a lot of those conversations, like, are you significantly in debt? Could you date someone who was in debt if there were reasons behind it? It's different than just being completely irresponsible with money. Like, so yeah, those conversations should be out there more so than they are. And frankly, like, finances are probably heavier in my mind than a herpes diagnosis. I mean, that's a really easy thing to work through if you're careful and you're educated about it. Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to the finance discussion with a lot of the people that I dated, because, like, it was never really a factor. Like, it wasn't like, let's combine our finances, let's talk about, like, getting serious. But now it's something that we're talking about. So it's definitely come in more recently. But yeah, maybe it doesn't have to come up right away in dating. I don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I was just curious because it sounded like you had a lot of different things to potentially disclose, and being rejected for herpes for many of us
Lord.
can be
Yes. A lot of things to disclose, that's for sure. Yeah.
So many of us are just like, someone rejected us because we have herpes, and there's probably so much more to it than that. And I think that what you've shared is just given a little bit of a reality check of other things that there are to add to the list of things to have a discussion about, right? So I don't exclusively have to tell someone, hey, I have herpes, but I also feel a need to share lifestyle stuff. So right now I'm very focused on my physical health, and this influences me not drinking. So that kind of shuts down a lot of activities for us to connect and get to know each other, dating nights. I'm also mindful of how I'm eating. I have to cook a lot of my foods. So going out to eat is something else that's off the table. So really all there is like lifestyle, physical activity. Do you want to do something outdoors? Do you want to go someplace indoors? Here are what our options are. So a lot of
Yeah.
options seem limited based on these things, and we talked about having an identity crisis, but working through that and being able to open up to people and be vulnerable with them and share, hey, here's where I'm at, here's what's going on with me, do you accept this, yes or no?
Mhm.
And to be rejected for, something like a herpes diagnosis, I think it, that is so out of your control that it feels like being able to, like, being rejected for having financial situation be less than desirable, like that would hit a lot harder because that is something that's in control, right? I'm just using that as an example just to give people some type of a takeaway, some perspective to take away, as they go into their day-to-day life, as they go into dating and they start thinking
Mhm.
about or vetting other potential partners. You might have herpes, but what about this other person and their
Yeah.
situation, right? You
They've
don't
got
know what they
something. They've
got
got
going
something
on.
to disclose. Everyone has something, and if I can also just add, like it's not about levels of. I don't want to use. I don't want to use the word promiscuous because it's not sex positive, but it's not about the amount of sex someone has or doesn't have, because like herpes can happen as I know the very first time you engage in it. So it can happen to anyone, anywhere. And once you get a diagnosis, I mean, what's this, the statistic is still 1 in 4, yeah? 1 in 4 people have
Oh,
it.
I don't look at that. Yeah, I don't look at
Okay,
stats at
because
all.
I think there is I think it is something like that it's like 1 in 4 people are either have it and know about it or are a carrier for it, which is why it gets so widely spread. Um,
Oh, 87% of people who have herpes don't know that they have it.
okay, so
That's
that's a very useful statistic,
mhm.
and that's why. I mean, I'm sure this guy, like, I'm not getting him off the hook entirely, but just like I'm sure he didn't know. If he, maybe he did, and that would be really horrible of him. But if he didn't know, he didn't know. Now that doesn't take away the fact that he should have used protection, okay? But I'm not blaming him for having something that he didn't know about. Um, I'm blaming him for not treating me in a consensual manner. That's a different story. So all I would say to anyone listening who's going through stuff is that a herpes diagnosis really is not the end of the world, and it feels like it really does, but it is not. And there's so many, um, it's just been part of my life, and it's been challenging. Like it's actually been really difficult, and probably because I've never had, quote unquote life before herpes in sort of a sexual, like
I,
a fully
I would
realized adult.
I would think that that makes things easier for you though, because this is all you've known. So with nothing to compare it to, there's no moments of grief to have to let go of who you used to be and who you thought you would be based on that. You only had this point of reference.
Yeah, but there's been a lot of grief for the
Mm.
life that I didn't get to have.
Ah.
I didn't get to have a quote unquote normal sex life. I didn't have to make disclosures to, I wouldn't have had to make a disclosure to every single sexual partner. I would have talked about safe sex, and as long as we use a condom, great. Like, let's do whatever. Like, let's have a one night stand. Um, but I had so much grief over the life that I didn't get to have. This is what I knew. This is what it is. I'm going to work through it. It sucks, but here it is. Facts are in front of me, and I can work around them. But yeah, there was a lot of grief for me. It was about what I didn't get to have as opposed to what I did have.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing as much as you have and for clarifying that point for me as well.
Oh, of
Do
course.
you want the opportunity to just shout out Zero Proof Nation? Like, how can
Yeah.
people connect with you? Who do you want to connect with? Why do you want to connect? Like, I'll let
Sure.
you do that and then I'll send us out of here.
Okay. Well, thanks, Courtney. So real quick, hi, everyone. So Zero Proof Nation is a, Zero Proof Nation is a global resource hub for all things non-alcoholic, ranging from booze-free bars to non-alc beverages to bottle shops to industry news. I just launched a global map of alcohol-free only establishments across the world, and there are close to 300 individual places that are solely alcohol-free, ranging from Poland to Australia to Chile and Mexico to, all sorts of places in North America and the UK. And I once again care about non-alc so much because of my own story, because of my own sobriety. So I want to connect with anyone who's interested in learning more about the non-alc world. I'm happy to give you tons of my own product recommendations, and more importantly, I'm happy to connect with anyone who wants to connect with me over my story, and if anyone needs any help. I'm not a licensed professional, so I'm not going to give you licensed help, but I can certainly provide my perspective of what it's like to date with herpes for the better part of my adult life, and to date sober. So I got both of those, check, and I'll have the check now.
All right, and where can people find you?
Well, on the gram, depends on what you want, but if you just go to my main page, which is at We Are Sober, it has the links to my other Instagrams, and if you're ever in the DC area, you can look up Booze Free in DC as well, which is a travel guide to the area from a non-alc perspective, and just find me on the gram. That's where I am. Oh my God, that's a horrible rhyme.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. If I can get you to stay on for a little bit after I close out the outro, we'll just kind of check in about how the podcast went for you, and I can add whatever disclaimers you would like.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much.
Yeah. All right. That concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People. Please like, rate, review, share, subscribe to this podcast. If you have not already, please go to www.spfpp.org/survey and take the survey for people who are living with herpes. This information is critical in helping us being able to continue to do what it is that we're doing here at Something Positive, expanding on consistent, accurate resources that people are able to utilize for their discussions around sexual health, as well as being able to inform people who might not have herpes, so that they can be a little bit more aware of the reality of it. Monday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific time, Patreon subscribers, which this is why you need to be a Patreon subscriber, have access to the weekly herpes support group. It's a virtual call with Patreon subscribers. If you are interested in being a part of that, visit patreon.com/SPFPP, and you can join for as little as $5 a month. And then the fourth support group every month the fourth Monday of every month is going to be open to the general public. So if you're on Patreon, you get weekly access. If you are not on Patreon, then you can join the group on the fourth Monday of the month, and that will be on the events tab of the Something Positive for Positive People website. So just visit www.spfpp.org, and you can go to the events tab, and you'll see the link and the time and the date and information for any events that we have going on. And if you go there now, you'll see that we're in the process of creating a virtual conference for Something Positive for Positive People. That will be May 23rd, 2024. So please mark your calendar so that you can attend. It'll be an all-day virtual conference where we will present the survey data that we have, as well as have some speakers there to talk a little bit about stigma, herpes, and get you some resources that you can that'll be a little bit more dependable than what you might have scoured the internet for. All right. That's it. That's all I got. Look forward to y'all being here for future episodes, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who wants to be a podcast guest, or if you want to make a donation, you can reach out to me directly. Again, this is a nonprofit organization, and we run off donations, we run off of grants and funding. Ain't no active grants right now. So yeah, these donations are really keeping us afloat. Till next time.